Namaste. So if you've been following this series from the beginning, we talked in the first episode about the big view of the right view. And so here I want to start getting into some of the topics toward the end, having to do with the yoga path and how do we realize this view. If you've been understanding what we're talking about so far, you'll get that the material universe and the mental universe that we live in is illusory. It's not to be taken seriously. It has to be overcome. And our conditioning to accept it as reality has to be changed, has to be erased, actually overridden with a different conditioning that sees subjective reality as the real reality and not this objective world that we've been trained to take as real. So how do we do that? Well, that's the subject matter of yoga. I've touched on this before in two different series. In Upadesha Undiyar, and also back when, about a year ago, in a series on yoga, my view of yoga. So to recap that very quickly, my view of yoga is that there are 7 chakras, and all of these chakras have to be brought to their highest energy level. And the chief obstacle to doing that is the fact that all of our energy is shut down, especially in the sex chakra. And the sex chakra has to be awakened before the other ones can be awakened. Now, of course, there's all kinds of preparatory work you can do and should do before you attempt that. But basically, the process of yoga means there has to be some method, some sadhana that addresses all 7 chakras, from the bottom to the top, from sex to superconsciousness. Okay? So that is what my sadhana has always been about since, my God, when I was 12 years old. Because it seemed intuitively obvious to me that without full energy and full engagement of all the sides of our being, that we have no chance really of reaching a higher state of being. So, okay, briefly, yoga is divided into 4 categories: karma yoga, bhakti yoga, Rāja-yoga, and jñāna-yoga. Now, somebody once said, prayer is us talking to God, and meditation is God replying, answering us. Well, that's close. That's pretty close. But it does bring out the fact that yoga is a two-way street. Yoga means linking or connecting two things. What are they? The individual being and the supreme being, or the soul and God, if you want to use Western terminology. But Bhakti yoga is actually the response of God to our karma yoga. When our karma yoga reaches the peak, then he will respond. And the same with Rāja-yoga and jnana. Jnana-yoga is the realization of the truth after Rāja-yoga has erased all the untruth. So we're talking about kind of a Zen approach here. It's really derived from Buddha's teaching, because the Rāja-yoga teachings in India are very much in a state of degeneration, unfortunately. Because of this, numerous false teachings like monism have risen up, counterfeit paths and teachings that obscure the original authentic teaching given in Vedanta and the Upanishads. So, where does that leave us? As Westerners, or people trained in Western culture, like most Indians today, when I have a conversation with an Indian gentleman these days, I find I almost invariably know more than he does about his culture, scriptures, religion, yoga, and so on and so forth. And that's not because I'm trying to put anybody down. It's just a fact. And anyone who's honest will acknowledge that it's true. That if you spend your life, like I have, studying these spiritual matters, you realize that the philosophy, the training, the conditioning that we're exposed to in school, and the whole outlook of Western culture is absolutely opposed to self-realization. And the mind that is created in us by Western culture is absolutely incapable of meditation because it's compulsively extroverted. So, all right, we have to begin with the extroverted mind. We have to begin where we are. Almost all Westerners have, by the time they reach adult age of 18, have become habituated to sex. It's very rare to find someone in the West or who has been influenced by Western culture who hasn't developed some kind of sex habits by the time they reach adulthood. That means the traditional approach of Indian culture with brahmachari, celibacy, and so on like that is not going to work with these people. So in this I agree with Osho, that there has to be an engagement of the sex energy in the process of self-realization. And so that means we have to study Tantra. Now, that's a whole big subject in itself, way beyond the scope of this small series. But basically, we have to open the source of energy, open the floodgates of prana. And that means that one has to attain the highest energy level in the sex chakra. And there's a very, very simple, a very straightforward way of doing that. It's mostly psychological. Interestingly enough, people always think of Tantra as some kind of an orgy or something. But Tantra is actually mostly psychological. And it's described in the Vivartha-vāda Tantra that one has to be aware of the image or the fantasy in one's mind at the time of orgasm. And this will lead him or her to the proper Tantra practice. Okay, so the Vivartha-vāda Tantra is a very important book. And it gives 120 different methods of attaining enlightenment. Now, only 8 or 10 of those involve sex. So you see, Tantra is mostly psychological. It's mostly internal. Yes, there might be some external practices that involve sex. But Tantra is, I would say, 80% psychology. So then what? Then there has to be, if this energy is liberated and is so freely available, now there has to be a way to store it, to channel it, to purify and to protect it. Because we don't want this energy getting wasted. We don't want it leaking everywhere, being uncontrolled and like that. That only leads to trouble. So there has to be a discipline for that, and that's Qigong. Qigong is about the second chakra. The Chinese call it the Dantian. the energy storage, like a big battery in the lower belly. And so this is also a big part of Zen practice. Why do Zen people sit in a certain way with their hands folded in front of their belly? It's to direct attention to that area and to store up the energy in the dantian. Why? Because that energy is necessary for the next level, which is the moving energy, the moving center, the third chakra at the navel or solar plexus area. So there has to be some moving discipline. Now this could be Tai Chi, it could be martial arts, it could be dance, there's any number of movement disciplines, even just walking. It's a way of moving that energy and cycling that energy, but in a disciplined way to make the energy available for use at a higher level. Now, all these three chakras, these three lower chakras, are also part of karma yoga. So karma yoga includes taking care of your health, your diet, exercise, your way of making a living, and the sacrifices, the deity offerings, sacred sacrifice that we have been covering in another series. Giving in charity. I give in charity regularly, and we're going to have a series on that too. And so many other things. Why? To gain merit, good karma, because you're going to need a lot of good karma to be successful in the higher yogas. So what happens if you are successful in karma yoga? Then bhakti yoga develops spontaneously. You cannot make yourself love someone. You cannot force the development of love of God or truth or any of the qualities that lead to self-realization. These cannot be forced. They cannot be artificial. They cannot be developed by habits, like regulated deity service and stuff like that. That's all part of karma yoga. Bhakti yoga happens spontaneously once we have qualified ourselves by the correct performance of karma yoga. Then love of God blooms all by itself, and this is a wonderful thing. So bhakti yoga, then there's a great deal to know about bhakti, the different flavors of bhakti, the different deities and their mode of worship. But basically in bhakti yoga, the deity worship and sacred offerings become internalized so that one is doing them spontaneously within the heart. And this opens up the heart center, which is the center of gravity of the whole being. Now, I only have a little bit of time left, so I can't go into Raja-yoga now. I'll hit it in the next episode. But beyond saying that, Raja-yoga is about deconstructing the mind. So to be successful in Raja-yoga, you have to have a strong enough foundation that you are ready and willing and able to live without a mind. That means good habits, good association, and plenty of karmic merits. So without doing your karma yoga very nicely, Raja yoga is not going to work. It's going to be jump up, fall down, like we covered in an earlier video. And we'll get into this more in succeeding episodes. Om Tat Sat, Om Harihi Om.